Now, at today's IT Modernization Summit, I'm joined by Bry Pardoe, the Chief Information Officer for the state of Pennsylvania, and Devyn Paros, the Chief Digital Officer for the state of Massachusetts. Devyn, Bry, thanks for being with us. How's it going?
Good. Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, doing well, thanks.
We're here at the IT Modernization Summit. I've now said that twice, so that's how you know it's real. Uh, we're at a really interesting time in state government, right? When we talk about modernization, the definition of what that is changing. And specifically, you two kind of have come at it traditionally from that digital services lens, which has really grown and changed since the introduction of the U.S. Digital Service in 18F at the federal level a couple of years ago, probably a decade ago at this point, and also sort of similar teams across state government as well. So I'll start with you, Bree. When you think about the changes in modernization and the changes in what digital services means in an IT modernization context for state governments, I mean, what's coming to mind for you?
So I think when I think about how Code PA really started, I think the concept was really to create a digital services team out of an executive order from Governor Shapiro. And the concept wasn't narrowly defined. It was just, we know that there is a different way that we can do this. And let's think about how we can build human-centered, no wrong door, human-centered platforms. And so when we came into the role, they hired someone who was really excited about the gnarly underbelly of IT and what powered a lot of those things, which is core to modernization in IT across the country. So as we evolved over 2.5 years, we started to take on things like identity and access management, PA.gov, payments transformation, which are really core and fundamental to the entire 2,300 application landscape that we have in Pennsylvania today. And so when we think about some of those core principles when we were walking into modernization in those spaces, sometimes it can be hard to think about how really technical implementations can take shape from the lens of human-centered design. But when you think about identity and access management, the login experience alone is something that has so many touch points in terms of how constituents and employees are engaging. And so we started to apply some of those principles, thinking about what needs to be authenticated, what are the best in class tools that we can leverage in order to make this a better experience across the board. How can we think about enterprise technology so that we can get efficiencies and unify experiences? And so when I think about digital services, the line between what digital services and what IT modernization is, I think that wall has been crushing down because we really need to think about it in all of the work that we're doing as an IT organization. And I think sort of the chasm between the two, at least in Pennsylvania, I can feel that coming to a close across all of our IT staff and the incredible workforce that we have and the digital services team that's fully embedded in our work.
Yeah, that's huge, and it's crazy to see, the growth that just Code PA has had in those 2.5 years, and going from you being the director of Code PA to now the state CIO is a good sign for exactly what you're talking about, right? Where all of those different modernization priorities are kind of coalescing in one spot. Devin, what are you thinking about in Massachusetts, kind of along the lines of what we just heard from Bree?
Yeah, so when we think about digital services here in Massachusetts, I think a couple of key principles come to mind. One is like people-centered. The next is holistic, and so thinking end-to-end, front to back. And third would be tech-enabled. And so I think this kind of where digital services and sort of traditional conceptions of IT modernization meet is more of a recognition that what we're really trying to modernize is our service delivery. And that a core part of that is technology, whether it's the technology that our constituents are interacting with, or it's the technology that our state staff are interacting with. Um, that it's tech enabled. It's not about solely the technology, but technology is a key part of that. And so I think the digital service lens that traditionally brings that like human centered, people centered way of working, the more holistic way of working, and thinking kind of cross silo, that you're not just talking about the technology on its own, you're thinking about the policy impact, you're thinking about the operational impact for the people who are delivering the services, answering phones, sitting in service centers, and that's, I think, in Massachusetts, what we've been focused on, both as a digital service team, but also kind of in our broader technology secretariat, is working across maybe traditional silos, breaking those down, and starting to think more holistically about what does it mean to have modern, like what does it mean to do service delivery in a modern age, and the role of technology in that.
I like that you talk about both silos and sort of doing this holistically because I think it's such a key point when you think back to the initial mission of these digital services teams and departments. So much of that was breaking across those boundaries and sort of making stuff happen, sort in a way that is not necessarily traditional to government. So let's talk about that a little bit. Let's talk about kind of that power of a digital services team and sort of how it enables you to convene and solve some of these problems in and out of the bureaucracy. Devyn, why don't you take it since you just sort of invoked it?
Yeah, so I think going back to the kind of holistic approach of thinking end to end, I think one of the great ways to convene people and to kind of focus people is talk about what the goals are that you're trying to achieve and what are the outcomes you're trying to achieve and orient everything to that. It might not sound like rocket science, but I think it's kind of unusual when you can get kind of policymakers, program staff, your technology, people, technology staff, your just like everyone to the table and at different levels, I would say kind of both within a given agency or within a given secretariat, but then also sometimes across agencies. And so one of the things that, we sit at the center in state government, in our central technology secretariat, and that the convening power that we exercise like exists not just within the context of like working on a given project or initiative with a specific agency, but then also kind of breaking down the silos across. And so one of the major priorities that we've been supporting for the state is around our making high quality childcare more affordable and available. That touches so many different departments, and it's we have this interagency childcare early education and care task force that has representation from every secretariat, and so they're already thinking about it in that kind of like unsiloed way. But then there's an opportunity to kind of bring the digital service lens and bring the technology lens into different spaces that people might not anticipate that there's a role for it there. And so there's, ways that we do it directly. There are also ways one of the things that I also think about is when we have like funding opportunities of bringing up that in conversation when I have other colleagues that are, meeting with agencies to determine like how we're going to allocate capital funding. Like, are you thinking about this? Have you talked with so-and-so? And building connections across state services that I think we're both sometimes uniquely positioned to identify and uniquely positioned to like do something about. So I could talk a lot more about this particular topic, but I'll pause there.
Yeah.
So
No, that's great. I think this is kind of where I nerd out the most too, is just like how do you structure everything kind of effectively to make that stuff happen and what does that mean? And Brie, I'm curious about your perspective here because you as you said earlier, Code PA is relatively new in terms of government timelines on the digital services space, and Massachusetts has certainly been plugging along for many years in the digital services game. So, Bree, tell us a little bit about sort of your perspective on kind of that power of digital services as a convener and sort of breaking down that bureaucracy a little bit.
So I would say there's maybe two sides. Some I touched on earlier, just how can we have one team that's not necessarily agency or delivery center focused that can bring things together and provide sort of like enterprise services, keystone design system, everything can look and feel the same. PA.gov, you have one place to go. I think the other side of it is on more of that bureaucracy admin side that you were talking about. So there's that small thing that everyone loves to talk about in IT digital services procurement. And there's a lot there that involves bringing together council, bringing together for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, it sits in the Department of General Services. We've got many procurement experts in agencies, but so much of what we do in terms of delivery can live or die on whether or not procurement is set up correctly, or we can move fast enough to meet the moment and meet the need based on how that comes together. So one of my favorite examples of where Code PA has played a role as convener in the Commonwealth is bringing together a collaborative working group across lawyers and procurement and contract owners and digital service and saying, how can we rethink this? Um, the administrative burden and cost of an RFP is wild. And so we actually did those calculations and brought it back to the table and said, can we create a new procurement vehicle that can help us be more agile and iterative, still entirely competitive? Let's bring people to the table. But rather than have an 18-month lead time, let's get competitive bids that can go out the door much quicker so that we can move at the pace that our agencies need. And when we first started describing this new procurement vehicle, they were like, legal's never going to let you do that, or DGS is never going to let you do that. And we're like, no, they were at the table. Like we all came together and co-created this to move so much faster. And as a result, once that went out the door, other ideas started spinning up because we all have to own our own inefficiencies. So they're like, what do you think about this review? Could we speed this up a little bit? And as soon as those bridges started to get built, we were able to make so much progress so quickly. And we continue to bring that group together to optimize because I think the faster we can bring services, bring new tools to life, think about how digital service can set standards, but we can enable our partners to be able to work with other digital service teams or operate in that way. I think the faster we can scale some of this across our.
That's such a great point. I want to dive a little deeper in sort of everyone being at the table there because I think that's something that definitely has shifted, right, in the last decade or half decade in state government. But I also want to talk about kind of the flip side of that, and that is getting to those naysayers, maybe. Maybe that's a little bit of a mean word to say, but getting to those people who don't think it's possible, getting to those people who maybe are getting distracted or stuck in some of the buzzwords like human-centered design and others that sort of exemplify what you're doing, but may not be super familiar or realistic to people who have operated outside of that system for so long. So Bree, tell me a little bit more about that and kind of what those conversations are like, what bringing those people together around that table and other tables is like in that process.
Oh, absolutely. I think it actually comes back to like human centering how we take our approach, if that makes sense. Like we need to come in with plain language and not assume that everyone knows every buzzword that is coming out. And so for us, a lot of it is what's the problem that we're trying to solve? If we start there, we find so much more common ground than coming in and saying, we want to flip everything on its head. We want to do things differently. No one came to Code PA and said, actually, we're perfect. No edits. Let's just move forward exactly as is. And I think honestly, just building the basis of what Code PA was on building relationships, understanding the problems, the needs, and the perspectives of the folks that are coming to the table, it helps us build such better and more sustainable solutions. And so I think any sort of anxiety around buzzwords can be alleviated when you open the conversation with, hey, we all want to get to this destination together. And also, I'm not going to understand at least 50% of the acronyms that you use. I might use words that you don't understand. And let's just create a safe space where we can all talk together openly about where we want to go. It's going to be great. And I think I've still only made it through 20% of the flashcard deck of acronyms that has been given to me in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. So there's still room to learn, but I think it's easy to get caught and mired in one way of working, one concept, when there are even things in Pennsylvania that we found where they're already working in these ways. They're just not calling it that. And so celebrating it, owning it, loving it, and like bringing people together around the incredible things that are already going on so that we can all move forward together has also been really important.
That's really interesting. And Devin, I want to flip it to you in Massachusetts. Again, so much of this work is relational, right? So much of this work is bringing people together and having those conversations. So how have you kind of come at that and maybe a different approach from what Bree's doing, or maybe it's the same thing? Let's hear it.
Yeah, so I definitely plus one to everything that Bree's saying. I think it goes back to the like people need to know that you care before they know what you know, and that's something that I like say to my team, to new team members coming in a lot, especially because we do so much work that sometimes we're embedding with other agencies or we're just providing guidance, and there's sort of like different levels of engagement and support, but fundamentally it's kind of I think one of the great benefits that we have as like the Massachusetts Digital Service, other digital services within uh, state governments or any other jurisdictions is that we're all part of the same team. Yes, we have different kind of primary mandates, but it's all in service of the public and public service delivery, and that I think is unique compared to, say, perhaps a vendor partner that you're working with. And so being able to come to the table with that lens is extremely powerful. I also have found that, when we talk about, human-centered design or people-centered design, it can be hard for people to understand what that is or means conceptually or what it looks like in practice. And so I think we place a lot of emphasis on doing the work. Like just show up, have some skin in the game, and get some stuff done. And that those experiences of like seeing it in action will be a lot more effective at, I think, demonstrating to people why it's different, even in some, big ways or small ways than how something might have been done before, than trying to explain it to people or debating it or using buzzwords. It's just like let's get in it and actually do the work. And one of the things that my team has been focused on a lot for the past 2 years is having dedicated people on our team like devoted to capacity building. And we do like small enablement engagements that they're never necessarily do for, but often do with or teach to do. And sometimes the do with kind of looks like doing for, but it's always explicitly upfront around like we're trying to build like awareness, skills, capacity. Sometimes it leads to people, in existing seats and roles taking on those, responsibilities, those skills, those ways of working. Other times it's led to, hey, a recognition that like it would be great if we had that capacity in house. Can you help us hire? And so that like have skin in the game actually solves some problems for people. That builds trust in you as a partner. It builds trust in how you're working and what you're like, you know, talking about and not just talking about it. Um, and for us, has like proven really fertile ground for just growing those capabilities in our partner agencies and kind of expanding the ecosystem, um, which is fantastic. So,
It's so interesting because I what was really striking me as you were talking was how digital services in 2025 in state government is so much more than digital. It really is all of those different pieces, the hiring, the consultative approach and all of the above. We only have a couple minutes left, and so I want to be super fast with this one. But Devyn, I'm going to go back to you first. When you think about kind of this moment, when you think about where we are in digital services and sort of how it, as we've talked about for the last 20 minutes, about how it interacts with IT modernization. I mean, what does all of this mean for the future of IT? Where are we headed? What is the things that we've learned through digital services efforts like the one that you have and like the one that Bree has? How does that help state government IT grow into the future?
yeah, that's a really big question. I don't, you know, pretend to have all of the answers, but for me and what I see in terms of like the seeds that we've planted here in Massachusetts, how I see kind of the ecosystem evolving across the country, I think it is moving more like continuing to move in that de-siloed and holistic way. Um, and breaking down kind of even notions of like digital service teams and like traditional IT being kind of separate things. Like, yes, like we need lots of different functions and lots of different people to make sure that the business of government can run. But it's I think this orientation where like there shouldn't be silos between those things, and people are going to have different expertises, different ways of working, different strategies for advancing their mission. Um, but one of the things that I've really appreciated and seen over time in my now more than 8 years with the Commonwealth of Massachusetts is the power of that breakdown happening where I have like overlap and shared mission and ways in which um, team members in our operations team that manage our DNS are able to help me advance the things that I'm responsible for and my team is responsible for. And those linkages I think will continue to happen more and more in more explicit ways. I think they've always been there, whether or not we're kind of fully leveraging them or kind of maximizing the potential. That's where I see a lot more of the potential is for us to kind of like take this, human-centered way of working, a de-siloed way of working, and continue to kind of advance that across all of the different functions of like traditional IT, like modern digital services, and just service delivery in general. And one thing I would say too that I think is really important when we think about the role of kind of technology leadership in state government, both our CIO is a cabinet secretary, and I think we've seen that kind of replicate a little bit. That's not 100% true across all of the states, but you're seeing it kind of more and more where the technology leadership is viewed as strategic leadership, not just like doers or task takers. And I think that's really important when you see that kind of shift, because having that at sort of the highest level, I think changes the game and changes the narrative around people who are doing technology work or are in traditional technology roles kind of throughout your enterprise and throughout your organization. Where in some cases folks might be a little more siloed or they don't have a seat at the table, and it's like how do we start like elevating folks and really bringing people together, having voices at the table, being recognizing the potential um, for working in that de-siloed manner. So
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, no, amazing. And Bree, you get to close us out. Sort of, uh, what do you think this is all meaning for the future of IT and how things are structured, kind of going forward?
Yeah, I think I would build on everything that Devyn said because I completely agree with everything that she stated. It's all about us being partners and standing shoulder to shoulder with agencies that are delivering absolutely mission critical benefits out the door to keep Pennsylvania running. We are incredibly fortunate in Pennsylvania to have a governor who cares deeply about IT, which is like such a rarity. And we just want to take advantage of the opportunity to leapfrog in Pennsylvania and help our agencies do everything that they can. Our goal is to be an enabling force. And I think the core principles of digital service and IT, they're now fully connected. And so us taking that mission and driving home how we can show up in the most meaningful way for our residents, for our workforce, that that's the ground truth of what we all need to do when we show up to work every day. And so I feel like it's just this incredible opportunity for us to continue to set that example for other states who are hopeful and wanting to get there, but also be collaborators and work together to drive towards a real future where human-centered design is just what we do. And it's not a fancy special thing. It's just thinking about that problem statement. And Devyn, I love that the most. Let's just show up and do work.
I love it. I love it. Thank you both so much for that, and thank you for being here. I think this was an interesting discussion, and I'm really looking forward to as we continue to have conversations about IT modernization, to seeing where these thoughts go. Because I think the speed at which digital services efforts have changed government and how government works is faster than anything we've seen in recent memory. And so it's really interesting to chart that progress. So Bree, Devyn, thanks for being here. Thanks for being a part of this.
Thank you.
Let's
And to our audience, stay tuned for more from today's IT Modernization Summit.